Hi, and welcome back to C1 Risk Training. Today we're going to be looking at how to actually write your internal control. And this is guidance that we give that actually really applies to any compliance operation. So this is how you can write internal controls, whether you're writing them in C1 Risk or not, but hopefully you are doing them in C1 Risk, of course. So, and then secondly, we are going to cover some of the key information that we like you to put in that is not necessarily specific to the OneRisk platform, but available in the OneRisk platform. So, okay, so here you'll see I'm in my compliance module. I'm in the internal controls tab, and I've got a record open here for an internal control. And this is how I'm going to start writing it. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to signify, what is the control that I'm, the control name. So this is a summary, of course, of what the control is doing. So I'm just going to add a little bit here. That gives you an idea that it is actually a control as opposed to just, oh, here are my information security policies. And then in the description, you see I've written the information security team documents, policies, and procedures that are reviewed and updated annually, approved by leadership, and distributed to employees for review and attestation. Now, I've got quite a bit in there, so this might even be potentially broken up between policies are documented, reviewed, updated, and annually, and approved by leadership and distributed to employees. So you could potentially write 4 controls here. But what we always try and do is consolidate as much as possible because, of course, in C1 Risk, the great thing about this platform is that you can attach multiple pieces of evidence to one control, which will ultimately save you time in your compliance work. So how do we break out this sentence? So these are really the key factors that any auditor is going to be looking for when they are examining your control. So first of all, who is doing it? So in this case, the information security team. And generally, we like to recommend that you put something along the lines of information security team or the chief HR officer or the COO, so on and so forth, as opposed to Bob or Mike or Janet or Lisa are doing this, because of course Bob or Mike or Janet or Lisa may eventually leave the organization, and what you really want is to design a control that is as timeless as possible for you. So signifying who is doing it by their actual title or the unit or team is really the best approach. Next, what we want is then the activity. So this is about documenting policies and procedures, reviewing and updating annually, getting leadership approval, and distributing to employees for review and attestation. So all of those are activities. So again, you could potentially break those up into multiple controls, but this control is going to cover all of them. And this is really what's going to dictate the evidence that we are looking for from that audit perspective. So here we would want obviously the policies and procedures, copies of those, some kind of signature that these have been reviewed and updated annually. So some kind of audit history to show that these are being reviewed. Leadership approval, similarly, that's some kind of audit trail that shows that leadership are approving these. And similarly, again, then employee attestations that employees have read and attested to these documents. Okay, so that's potentially, again, 4 or 5 pieces of evidence that you would add to this control, but that's completely possible in C1 Risk to deliver that audit. And then last of all, we want to know how often it's being done. And again, there are different cadences that you need to collect evidence for. Generally with policies, we are looking at them on an annual basis. And so there we've just got that annual. We make sure that we put it in annual. Another example of this could be a quarterly access review, where obviously then you would have quarterly, where you could say something along the lines of access review logs for system X are reviewed on a quarterly basis and approved by leadership. That's another control that could be for quarterly access review. That way you've got quarterly in here. And that how often as well, we actually control that in a separate field in the OneRisk platform. So we give you the option to also put that here so you can show how often this control is being implemented. And so here we're going to select annually. Next, we're going to go to some things that are really a little bit unique to the OneRisk platform. So we have this source field here, which is your internal reference number. This is just a way for you to help sort and segment controls. If you're doing, if you're responsible for multiple compliance frameworks, if you're doing SOC certification, if you're doing ISO, CMMC, all at the same time, what you really want is to create a source control that's going to help you identify which framework or frameworks this control belongs to. Now, note we do also connect internal controls to their relevant frameworks as well, and I'll show you that in just a second. But this is just a guideline for you. So I put my, this is my company symbol, and then I've got that this is a 27001 control. The actual control that it's related to in ISO 27001, and then I've just put the year. And again, I may or may not choose to do this. This would depend on whether I'm planning to update it every year as we go through the audit. And sometimes I use this as an indicator for me to know that I've done the review, and so next year I'll update it to 2023 and so on and so forth. Okay. Next, for C1 risk, we want to know if it's a manual or automated control. So manual means that there's human interaction effectively, and we might be validating this through an evidence request to an evidence owner. Automated being that we're doing this through an API integration with a business system, and we're just pulling the data in, or we're executing the control through automated process where similarly that control is being delivered by automation. Okay, guidance is just additional notes for you to attach in reference to this control. And next we come to control strength. And this is also something auditors look for. So they want to know whether effectively the control is fully implemented, partially implemented, or not implemented. So in this case, you see I've put 100% because we do all of those things. Typically anything over 80% is considered to be fully implemented. Then anything below that down to about probably 20 or 30% would be partially implemented. If you're not implementing the control, realistically, you should put 0. But that's, that it's really a judgment call for you. This is going to impact your risk analytics, because if you have been following any of our other trainings, you know that as part of our asset management, what we do is we look at the risks associated to any asset, as well as the controls that are in place and the strength of those controls to show you how well you're protecting your asset. So this is where control strength comes into play internally, but the auditor is also looking for that as well. And they're going to potentially ask you questions based on that control strength, or look for different types of evidence to validate it. Next, we want the control frequency. So again, we put that annually. Now here we have nature of the control, detective, corrective, preventative. So that's very much pretty self-explanatory. What type of control is this? This is potentially optional in that, especially for this kind of documentation control, really, of course, policies could be any of these. And then the next, so you really want to decide, is this a control that is used to detect potential risks or issues? Is it designed to correct issues that you've actually had against your organization? And again, prevent them from happening again, or prevent them from happening in the first place. That's how you would obviously describe those 3 options there. And then next we come to key control. And again, these key signifying that this is a key control is that this control is really directly related to reducing a risk. So if you signify this as a key control, then ideally what you're going to do is connect this to your risk register. So I'm just going to do that now. So what risk is this combating? I'm going to add this to governance. I think that's what I'm going to do for this one. Yep. So I'll just add governance there. So now I know what risk this key control is combating. Then last of all, we just assign it to the control owner. Again, if you've got multiple, that's not so common, but if you've got multiple, you can do that. And then we're just going to click save. Now our control has been written. If we've pulled it from the control library will already be connected. Or now we can go in and we can look up which framework we want to connect this to. And then the next step, of course, will then be also to connect the relevant evidence records that we're going to need to verify that we're implementing this control. So that concludes our training today. Bit of a long one, but I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks very much for joining us.